I am such a champion for other people having what they want, but I can't sit here and say that I'm actually a champion for people having what they want if I'm over here abandoning myself in order to help other people get their dreams. And I just think like this is what it looks like to really empower yourself.
I would love to hear for you, because you're in it right now and your eyes are opened at a different level. You've said this a few times that you're like, I can't put Jeannie back in the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
If you were talking to Lindsay, I don't know what, 6 months ago, a year ago, what would you tell her?
I don't think she would have been ready to hear it, but it was about a year ago that I just started to feel that inner knowing, like that little intuition I've been talking about, to slow down. And I think it was because I had to slow down in order to feel into how massive this like next up level was going to be. But I can only grow as far as I'm willing to go like deep into the internal stuff that I've been going into. And there wasn't space for it. There just wasn't space in my mind, my heart, my spirit. There wasn't space in my calendar. And I've talked about that lesson, like that motto, not to mistake stillness for laziness. But it just started to unravel this much bigger transformation than I didn't know that it was all in there. And I keep using this analogy of like, if you're wearing like a sweater and you see a little thread and you just start pulling at it, you're like, oh, let me just, you know, you're not snipping it off. You're just kind of like, oh, let me just pull this. And then you kind of keep pulling and keep pulling. And like before I knew it, by like fall last year, as I started to slow down and I started to feel some really big emotions come up, it was like I had pulled on that thread so much. I was wearing like a crop top. Now it was like not even a full shirt. And I thought that felt vulnerable. You know, if you think about feeling like exposed, now my midriff was exposed, hypothetically speaking. And then I just kept pulling and pulling. And I've like started to go into like this depth within myself that we were talking about. I didn't realize how much I was afraid to go there. So now I kind of feel like I'm wearing pasties. You know, feel like very exposed to myself. And it's just a new kind of vulnerability I think I've always been willing to share. Like as much as I knew myself, I've always been willing to share with the community, and the depth that I feel like I'm getting to know myself now. It doesn't feel scary to share. It just feels very, very vulnerable to share. And I just like understand, I think on a new level, what it looks like to lead from a place of vulnerability, because I could never meet the people that I wanted to serve in this kind of fear and discomfort and pain, because I wasn't going to that depth within myself.
I picture, like as you're saying, just crop top and
my
then
pasties.
It's just your pasties now, which that's a hot look. let's be real.
I feel pretty great in my skin at 40 years old. So like we're gonna rock the proverbial pasties.
Yeah. We're not actually sitting here with pasties right now.
No.
But I think what I envision, and I think this is so easy for us to see in other people, I see that as you're fully seeing yourself for the first time. And for someone outside, it's like, how empowering. What does that process feel like? Because I think maybe there's like a little bit of a squiggly road. And then like, yes, it's overall very empowering. But what does that process felt like?
Yeah, not empowering at all. What I'm learning about even just like the word powerhouse and ultimately the mission that I do have of empowering myself and I don't give anyone else, like I'm not empowering you, but I can show you through my own journey how to empower yourself. And I am learning that on like such a new level, that the empowerment has actually come from looking at the things that I was most afraid to look at, like the biggest insecurities, the biggest fears, the biggest vulnerabilities, the places where I realized that I'd been abandoning myself and what I want in order to make someone else happy, so much to that I didn't even really have a connection with what I wanted. So it's been this really slow process that I'm just beginning. Like, we're recording this when I'm like in the early stages of learning what it's like to build that relationship with myself. And I think that was the part that, I wanted to share, because this is something normally I would wait to share and want to wait and share when it's a little bit more put together, when it's a little bit more polished. And I don't believe that every trauma and wound is meant to be shared when it's like this gaping cut. I think Jen Gottlieb talks about that, like, share it when it's a scar, not a scab. But I also know that I right now am craving to know that I'm not alone in going through like these very real feelings that are coming up, and learning about myself and learning what it actually means to me to be empowered. What I'm realizing most of all is that to feel empowered, to feel connected to my own power, means to look at it all, even the things I've been afraid to look at, and to choose it. To choose myself, to choose to love all of it, even if there are things I still want to evolve and change and become better in. That's like one of my favorite things about myself, is my genuine desire to grow. And yet to be able to choose the parts that I didn't realize I was not willing to look at, just like some of those deeper insecurities, how empowering it actually has been to meet myself there and still choose me.
That's the powerful piece to it, is that choice, choosing yourself. What does that look like in practice? Because we're like, okay, I'm here for it. I'm going to lean in. When you're going through something where you're saying, okay, I'm coming home to myself, I'm doing the work. What does that work look like? Because a lot of it sounds like it has to be done internally. It has to be within yourself. And of course, you have so many resources for community. And I think you touched to that in when you say, hey, I'm going through this, it's saying to yourself and to someone else, we're not alone, which is so powerful. But then that further step, it's like, okay, we can kind of be on our own individual journeys, but what does that look like in practice internally, doing the work?
I love this question because I feel like practically this is a lot of times where this is actually what people want to know, they want to hear. And I don't want to just talk on surface level. I want to maybe like take the time to share how this initiation into this season looked for me, so that people can kind of find themselves wherever they're at. And I've been able to share up until this point just that intuition that I was just supposed to slow down. I was supposed to do less and do it better. But even that is like the personally developed version of it, right? Because I'm still achieving. Look at me, just doing less, but I'm doing it better because that's what I do. And it was just this intuition that I was supposed to start to take things off my plate, clear more space. And what I didn't realize was that once the space finally arrived, which for me last year was once we wrapped up the event, once we wrapped up our membership and just started to take more of the things that were filling my time, where I was pouring into other people and I loved it, but starting to regain some of that time and space back for myself without immediately putting the next thing that I was launching out into the future so I could throw myself into it. The part that surprised me most in the space was how much emotion started to come up. And now I understand the emotion as, through therapy and through some of the things that I've been doing, understanding it as the part of me that had been neglected, like those inner child parts that hadn't felt listened to, hadn't felt heard, just trying to get my attention. And honestly, it scared me. So this was 6-7 months ago. I just had some very raw emotion come forward that I didn't know what to do with. And it was so unlike anything I'd ever allowed myself to feel. And one of those was anger. And I don't consider myself an angry person. I don't sit in anger. I don't allow anger. And I think that was another clue, just that there was so much more to meet within myself, and I wasn't ready yet. So I just kept moving forward, kept the space clear, and then, still allowed myself my coping mechanism of doing things that feel really, really great and really validating. And I am doing things in the business right now that I'm only doing things I'm actually obsessed with and feel really aligned. And I have a lot of space. So in the space, just starting to notice where I feel really triggered. And instead of running the other way, instead of numbing it in whatever ways we like to numb, I love to shop, I love to work, I love to just think positive and almost go toward like the spiritual bypassing way of dealing with things, instead of saying, what if I just sat with myself in this feeling and just let it show me what it wants to show me? And it was a couple months ago right now that I realized there were just some triggers that had kept showing up. And these were triggers that were showing up for 2 years. And I just knew that I could keep moving forward and pretending that they weren't there, or I could do the new thing, the less comfortable thing, and find the right, program or book, and I just think it's important too, to like really notice what you feel drawn to. I don't want anyone to like listen to my journey and think, okay, I've got to do the exact program and read the exact book or see the exact therapist that she's going to. I think it's like that whole idea that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So it was these little things, having that conversation with Kat Norton on the podcast, hearing her talk about the To Be Magnetic program. So diving into that, and it's about manifestation, but it's really about unblocking, like as the key to manifestation, and starting to look at some things that I just couldn't figure out how to solve as my current self, and some dynamics within, my family relationship that were really painful. And I just wanted to be right about my point of view. And instead, like choosing to dig in and look at what was underneath and meet myself, like meet parts of myself that I didn't realize that I was not willing to look at. One of them being the fact that I felt up until this point in my life very insecure at times. And the part of me that people see that's very confident in my abilities is true. But there's also this part of me that from as early as I can remember is just kind of like wondering if I'm simultaneously too much and not enough. Like they're kind of in this tug of war, like, no, I'm the wound. No, I'm the wound. Because sometimes I do. Sometimes I feel like myself, my emotions, my needs are too much and they're just a burden. So I'm going to hold those in. And then sometimes I do feel like I'm maybe not enough, or do I really have what it takes to like fulfill and step into this vision that I also simultaneously have? And I just started to get really quiet and notice like what I was pulled toward in terms of resources or books or eventually therapy to like help me sit with things that I had been so afraid to sit with. And I don't actually know what that fear was about, other than I think I was afraid to find out that it was true. And I think the more that I just kept achieving and doing the things that made it feel temporarily soothed, it was easy to then not have to address the actual wound. It was like this void that eventually I got to a point where I was like, how much more am I going to try to fill it with things that can't fill it? And it sent me down this path of starting to, do therapy, starting to do things that felt in this season really supportive, reading books that helped me understand myself and like some of the patterns that were hard for me to look at. I think because I've had such a beautiful childhood and such a beautiful life, it was really hard to look at things that almost felt like, well, if I look at the fact that I've got some stuff from childhood, am I saying I don't appreciate the parents that I had or the upbringing that I had? And it isn't this like really traumatic story. I know other people have it so much worse. So again, just deflecting any attention on myself, being so unwilling to look at myself because it felt like oh, poor me. I had, whatever it was, someone tell me I wasn't good enough in third grade and now it's haunted me. That just felt so superficial, but it was, and that actually isn't the story. That's like a made up one. But, I have versions of that where it's like, that just almost feels so insignificant in comparison to what I know other people have dealt with. But the more I kept trying to avoid sitting with the very real feelings it was leaving me with and understanding the root of them, the more I just kept feeling like, I know I'm achieving so much, I'm helping so many people, and I love that, but it's not filling this void that I feel in myself. And I owe it to me to really investigate that so that I can bring the most whole version of myself to my community, to my marriage, to my friendships, to my family. And I think we don't talk enough about how scary it is to meet your true self, because then you have to sit with the truth that not everybody is going to want to stay in connection in the same way to that true, authentic version of you. And I haven't had any major shedding, but I'm like sitting with the fear that's showing up, of just what isn't aligned and where do I need to choose myself instead of choosing to bring this version of me that isn't even being real into the places where I'm showing up with people and then wondering why I don't feel fulfilled by those connections.
The theme that I'm seeing from this, one of them, there's so many things, but on the level of emotion, talking about a lot of us have that like good girl mentality. Like when I think of like getting angry, you're not supposed to get angry, or we don't want to stay in sadness. And I'm not saying we need to sit in those emotions either, but I think a lot of us stay in this kind of lukewarm area, whether it's being how well we know ourselves, our identity, our impact, like those emotions, us restricting ourselves to try to just make sure everything's good. Everything's okay. This is working. What I love is that you're going, okay, I feel that something is off and I need to go deeper. And it opens up this new range that is on the side of emotion, but it's also on the side of getting to know yourself on a deeper level. And I just think of like your future self and her looking at you right now. Because just kind of mirroring off the other question, like, what do you think, and this is just for funsies, what do you think is waiting for you on the other side of that fear of, okay, it's scary to fully know yourself. It's scary to open yourself up to rejection. But like, what are those amazing things on the other side that are coming?
I think it's just as simple as a feeling of freedom and peace that I have been chasing and didn't realize that it can't come from anyone other than within me. And then it doesn't come from the external things. Like, yes, money creates financial freedom technically, but I think any of us who believe that this is all so much more connected and energetic than we can see, I think it's a feeling of security and freedom within yourself that allows you to be the kind of person who brings the kind of financial abundance in that gives you the feeling of freedom that you already had. The money is just a reflection of it, if we're going to get like really woo-woo. And I think I just decided to start at the source and source that sense of freedom, empowerment, peace, connection from within myself. Because as much as I love to connect others, I didn't realize how much I wasn't actually connected to myself, to my own desires, my own needs. And I shared on one of the recent podcast episodes just this realization that I didn't even know who I was if I wasn't meeting someone else's need. And that was hard to sit with. because I have such amazing people in my life, the most amazing husband. I have like the most amazing friends that aren't even asking me to do that. I was trying to source my own sense of worthiness by being someone I thought I had to be, because I learned it as a kid, that was how I got love. And I've been the one holding myself in that prison, And that's both heartbreaking, but also really empowering, because you realize you were holding the keys to the jail cell the entire time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So much of that going back to, and you talking about your childhood, and you were mentioning to me that in part of your therapy, you've been really introduced to more inner child work.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the practices that, I'm just curious, you've been doing for inner child work?
Yeah, it's been so interesting to understand that whole world and how much I feel like I'm so late to this conversation, and also I'm right on time, And I never really understood it. I've heard people talk about it, but I never understood it. Same with like the idea of shadow work. And I had to start by actually building a connection. And that was one of the first things that I did with my therapist, was realizing that if I haven't really been attuning to that part of me that still feels like, this young girl, that she might not trust me a whole lot. Or I almost had to imagine I was like meeting a child for the first time who doesn't know me and doesn't feel a connection. And then realizing it was as simple as how much I would abandon my own needs because I was so focused on who else I could meet their needs, that simple things like just being in my own body and noticing, what are some of the physical needs that I have? Am I hungry right now? Do I need something to eat? Do I have to go to the bathroom? Do I need some water? Because I can tend to be in my mind a lot. I've done so much personal development. It's sort of like that is like very developed, and my body is like, hi, yeah, we've been here with you your whole life. I don't know if you know this, but we've got some needs as well. So even just like starting with meeting my physical needs, tuning into how I feel, whether it's, and then through journaling or meditation, or for me, like going on walks and just like really setting the intention to connect in with that part of me has been really helpful too. And just, I remember the first day that I was like starting this practice, and I was starting to notice that just even these like memories from childhood and things that I loved were starting to come to the surface. It felt like there was a part that was awakening, and just tuning into that, like on a daily basis, just kind of talking to myself the same way I would talk to a little one, and saying like, well, what do you need today? What do you want to do today? And I remember I have, my intuition kind of speaks to me more as like, it's not audible, it's not visual, it's more of just like a knowing, and I don't hear it. It's just sort of like all of a sudden it's just there, and I just know my answer. And that's kind of how this process has felt, where one day I just kind of asked like the same way, I don't know, it just was like intuitively, I just said like, what do you want to do today? And the answer was just, I just want to play. And then I remember being like, oh, well, that felt okay. That felt like it wasn't me saying that. And then I just said, okay, great. What do you want to do? And just like this immediate, like, I want to go on the swings. It was like this memory of like, as a child, the feeling of like this swing set at the park behind our house. Like when swing sets were definitely not safe. Like we're talking the 90s, when we should not have been on those swings. They were so deathly. And just like that feeling of freedom. And I said, okay. So that day, even though I had a full day of, meetings and stuff, I just looked up like, okay, where's there a playground near me? And I felt so weird, especially being an adult on a playground without a kid. You're like, is this even okay? Do I need like a guest pass or something? And I just went on the swings. And I remember I could only like get myself to like really settle in and do it for maybe 15 minutes. But it was like, and I want to speak to that like, it hasn't been this like, oh my gosh, and then I just felt free, and then it was all so beautiful. It was like, this has felt super awkward at times, to just like tune in and realize like how disconnected I've been from like the parts of me that really make me me. And not to say that I've been projecting anything that's phony to the outside world, because this is me as well. But there's just a lot of me that I had abandoned along the way, and I didn't even know it.
What I love too is you mentioned having a full schedule. So I'd love to talk about that. You hear about doing this work, and I kind of almost picture like, do I need to go like into the mountains, into the woods or whatever, like clear my, maybe for some people. But what does that look like for you? Yes. Creating space. Yes. You've talked about like journaling and these things, put that into your calendar.
Yeah.
But what does that look like for you during, seasons where you're doing a lot?
Yeah. What's been so interesting, and I think part of this is why first my intuition had to get me to slow down. So I don't know what it's like for everybody. I'll just share what my experience has been, because I'm married. We don't have children. I have a business, which very much, is demanding, and I have friendships and relationships that are very important to me. So it's going to look different for someone who's actually keeping another human being alive. I have the ability to focus on myself and be a little bit more selfish in that sense. But it started by just really listening to that nudge to just slow down. And I think when people hear me say that, I don't know if you kind of picture me just completely hitting pause on everything. And that's not the case, because I have a business. And not only that, but with some of the other financial investments my husband and I are making, my business is supporting us. So I don't have the choice to just stop making money. But here's what's been the interesting thing is like all this activity that was coming from this place of feeling more like I had to, or more like I was doing things because people wanted me to do them than doing them because that was what I authentically really felt pulled toward. Even if I think about like my human design as a generator, like the things that were lighting me up. The more I stripped those back and just let it be okay that yes, some people weren't going to understand, or there were going to be people who felt like they weren't getting something that they really wanted from me or from the community, just letting that be okay and only saying yes to the things that were like a full body F yes, like the Expanders Retreat, like the Powerhouse event, we're going to launch 6-figure school again, letting it be okay that I was just going to have a lot more space than I was used to. And so practically, I think that step had to come first, because there have been weeks where, if I check in with myself, and if it had been in a previous season where I had a calendar full of obligations to show up for other people, it would be a lot harder to go as deep as I've been able to go, as fast as I've been able to go. But then also, it's kind of like been this reclamation of like, it's okay to advocate for my needs in that way of, and I've even, sent you texts, and I'm so grateful to have friends like you who I've even said this to you, like, thank you for being one of the people that I can say this and you totally get it, where like, it's, hey, I know we had made these plans to, we were going to go to Austin and do this thing. And I said, I just need to take care of myself right now. And I need to cancel that trip. And, we're here in New York City filming podcasts, which is so much fun. And just to say, hey, I don't know if I'm going to have like the bandwidth to go to dinner. I know we were planning to do that. And I've just started to advocate for like the space I still very much need. So it's been this beautiful process of creating my own boundaries and honoring my boundaries and realizing it doesn't actually make me a bad person at all. It wasn't this fear that it made me a bad person. It was like this fear that other people wouldn't feel important if I wasn't prioritizing them anymore. But I'm realizing that I think all along, I would have loved to see an example of like a really powerful woman who's like, hey, I would love to connect with you. And right now I'm taking care of myself. So I don't have the bandwidth to do that. Or a lot of messages right now, I just have a template for myself that like I kind of modify whenever an opportunity comes up. But just being able to say, I'm in a bit of a cocoon season, just really integrating some deep things. And this does not reflect my desire to connect with you. It's a commitment to honoring the season that I'm in and what I need right now. And if we're meant to connect on the other side, we will. And so that part is important too, because it's even like before, what I would do is I would keep the loop open and I would say, let's connect in 6 months, and just letting it be okay that I don't know if I'm going to want to connect with that person in 6 months. So I don't say it. I'm just not leaving these energetic loops open, which is bringing me so much more energy to put into the relationships that I'm growing right now, to the business in the areas that I want to grow it. But it's giving me energy to pour back into myself. And here's what's crazy about that is the business hasn't skipped a beat. The whole goal of this do less and do it better season was to really challenge my belief, which I knew was a limiting belief, that the business only grows if I show up and I work. It was very much dependent on me doing, and just to really lean in fully to this belief that's the more abundant belief, which is that, the business grows as a reflection of my being, not my doing. So it's required me to do a lot less doing. And that's been uncomfortable, but it's been really cool to see how supported I've actually been, like by, whatever you believe is supporting us in this giant world and universe. But to realize that the business hasn't skipped a beat. I feel so much more aligned anytime I'm showing up and either emailing on social or like sharing about an offer, where before I would feel like, oh gosh, I've got to be really pushing our event right now. We got to fill tickets, but like this anxious energy. I'm just like, no, the people will come. They will come because I'm taking the time in this season to go really deep within myself. And the people who are going to be in that room deserve to have the version of me who's going to show them what that looks like to meet themselves and like really find that power in themselves. So it's just been a slower season. Results are coming slower. Even this feels like a little bit like probably I shouldn't share it, so I'm going to. Our event is like less than 90 days away, and I still am not crystal clear on who all the speakers are supposed to be. And I've just had to trust myself at such a deep level because as things are revealed, for example, the speakers are one, and please, everybody, don't send me a speaker pitch. I love you so much, but I promise it's not that I have a lack of amazing women in my life. It's because I'm leaning so deeply into my intuition and trusting the process at such a deep level that I know I have to break this pattern of thinking I'm in control and really surrender to the fact that I've always been a person of faith. I've always known that there's something far more powerful than me in control. And I'm really testing the limits of that right now. So that was like a long answer to your question of just really saying I'm quite literally rewiring every pattern that has made me who I am. And in the process, I'm becoming who I always knew I was meant to be.
I see it. I see it right in front of me. And that's what's so cool and so powerful when you talk about the woman who you're like, I wish I would have seen a woman that would have held her boundaries that way.
Yeah.
And in such a loving way. You're such a loving person, and your desire to help others and show up for them is coming from a good place, but it cannot be at your detriment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you talk about these things, it's so cool because obviously most of it comes back to, as far as I see it, just personal peace. At peace with yourself, at peace with your life, with your business. And what's been the most surprising thing of how just working on that personal peace and working on just as simple as like, what do I need? How has that translated into your business?
I think it's happening right now. So it'll be cool to get to share 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, how that actually translates. But when you said the word peace, I think it's this peace with my decisions, getting connected to my physical body. I feel like even the cells of my body are turning on in a way that they couldn't before because I wasn't tuning into my own needs. My intuition is so clear. But the unfortunate part about that is then when I know it's time to make a move or have a hard conversation, I can't unknow it. And I'm also now not willing to self-abandon and resist having that conversation when I have built and started, like I'm at the very beginning stages of building such a deep level of trust in myself. And I think we underestimate how much that's where confidence is built. That the moment I know there's a hard conversation I have to have, a difficult decision that people will definitely misunderstand, or I just need to be a little bit selfish, or what I would normally be afraid of being perceived as selfish, having such peace in those decisions, not from this place of like, because I think we can almost, those of us that are maybe recovering from some people pleasing or self-abandonment, we can almost swing too much to the other side of like, well, screw everybody. I'm going to take care of me for once, which maybe that's part of someone's process. But I think for me, it's been this deep, deep trust that if I have to abandon myself to make someone else happy, that's actually not for their benefit either. And that kind of peace that comes with making decisions from that place, and the kind of love to even like love whoever's on the other side of that decision that may not even understand, to have the kind of connection with myself right now where I trust me. I really trust me, and I trust that because of that, and because of the faith that I have and how interconnected we all are, even if it means I play the villain in someone's storyline, that even that is for a purpose. And I don't get to always be the Disney princess in someone's storyline. Sometimes that means that the role maybe I'm supposed to play in that season is more of a villain. That's a little bit extreme, but I think those who, again, have dealt with like people-pleasing tendencies really understand that the last thing I actually would ever choose is to be someone's villain, because I am such a champion for other people having what they want. But I can't sit here and say that I'm actually a champion for people having what they want if I'm over here abandoning myself in order to help other people get their dreams. And I just think like ultimately that is what I'm grateful for this experience to be able to share, because this is what it looks like to really empower yourself.